Hey, and we are live. Welcome to episode 7, I believe it is, of Operation Grow Show Season 5. This week we are going to be um, continuing with the series of presentations from Cascadian on population genetics. We started off with, what was it, the Wisen. I've been watching bloody Breaking Bad. It's come out with the wrong names.
Hardy Weinberg. Hardy
That's the
Weinberg
one.
theory.
Hardy Weinberg theory, and then last week we also had the founders effect, and we're going to continue that on with today's presentation, which is going to be on bottleneck effect and what that means and implications that it has for when you get further down the line. So, without further ado, how's everybody doing? Let's start with Raptor. How are you doing, sir? How's your weekend been going?
Thanks for the intro. I'm doing well, just relaxing. Actually, just had something to eat. So, I had the great idea of not eating before the show and just like staring into the camera, just like, now all I can think about is food. So yeah, made sure to have that and doing pretty well. Just actually planning out what I'm gonna need for my trip up to Northern California, visiting Humboldt. So that should be really
Oh,
cool.
nice.
Yeah, we're just gonna go up there with a friend. It's their birthday, but I actually been wanting to go up there to collect spores and to look at the flora around there in each season. So hope my goal is to go every 3 months or so to like the Northern Territories and go to different areas and be acclimate, understand the local ecology there. But I would settle for once or twice a year and just pick the most peak seasons. So
Nice,
yeah,
nice.
that's what's going on. Yeah, I'll be leaving Friday and heading back Sunday. And other than that, just gonna be puffing on some Apollo haze. And tomorrow will be the first day of the fourth week of the Scarlet Begonias, and they're doing very well. Uh, just straight up developing the bud sets, and I'm actually gonna take some cuttings that are too small to even matter there, and yeah, just make more airflow.
Mm.
I wanted to see how they grew, just how it grew in general. Before I was gonna cut it off just to like amp up production. I was like, I should look at how it's gonna form and everything. I am gonna mess around with it. So yeah, that plus being lazy just made my decision. I was like, yeah, I'll leave it alone, whatever. And then I'll just dip that in some cloning solution that I made from Coot that he gave me the recipe to. But yeah, that's what's up with
Nice.
me. Uh,
Cool.
Hope everyone's having a good Saturday.
Okay, great. I think Chris is having it in the chat. Well, at least we know that Chris used to be a premature ejaculator. He hasn't received the rider yet, so Chris still is a premature ejaculator by his own
Yeah, yeah.
admission.
Yeah, we've been doing Minder commercials. So if you ever find any one of us
Yeah,
on
don't
chat,
be
and
his,
any of yeah,
don't be his all hell-minded commercials.
uh, please be advised. We do not own Minders. We do not represent the Minder P&L systems. We are merely commenters
We
of the
just have
great
something to
product P&L
say.
Grow Systems.
Streaming, nice to see you again this week. So, how are you doing, buddy?
Not too bad. Just got off work there at lunchtime and kind of put the kids to bed. Now working in the garden.
Excellent, excellent. And how's Canada treating you at the moment?
It's cold and wet. Apparently we
Yeah?
got Pip's weather. You got our sunshine, so ask for it back.
No, you're not getting it back, I'm afraid. It's nice. Yeah, have some good weather for a bit. Yeah, the plum trees all full of blossom, and you can just hear it humming away. Step outside, you just hear all the bees, and it's like the whole tree is buzzing away. So it'll be a good. Well, I say good. That means there's gonna be plums all over the lawn this year. Yay! Not so good. And Duck Reed, so how you doing? You're on mute.
Oh, yo, yo. Cheers, everybody. What's up? Not much. Just hanging in like a nutsack. Um, yeah. Still waiting to see some sex on those plans. Yeah, that's about it. Not much update. Weather's always fine and nice and dandy over here. Nothing to complain about there. Yeah, looking forward to Cascadian presentation. Yeah,
Yeah.
cheers.
Cool. Yeah, island style. Eh? It's always good weather. It's fine. Hey, and then Lefty, how you doing, buddy? On the road, I know. So keep your eye on the road.
Oh, I'm parked for a quick minute. I'm doing all
Ah,
right, man. Everything's going pretty good. Plants are all looking good. They've been in flower for about a week. I've already called a few off, but looks like I'm gonna have a good selection of choices for males. And then I'm down to about half of my females I started with. Well, half the plants I started with, I think, are all females. So I should be looking pretty good for choices as far as making a selection. So everything's going pretty good. Plants look good.
nice. Good to hear. And Genetic Memory Farms, how you doing? How things going with you this week?
Well, you know, man, got my black vest pressed, got my white collar popped. I'm at the cantina having a little blue milk on the rocks. No, just just can't complain, man. Hanging out on my second RSO coffee and woke up with a little backache, so this is helping out. So can't complain, man. Just feel lucky to be here with y'all, man. That's the honest truth. I feel lucky that we get to hang out, you know, and have a little community here and have these, you know, people in chat that actually want to come by and listen to us and hang out with us. So yeah, I'm just grateful, man. I'm a lucky man.
Do they call those bloom
yeah, the garden
Russians
just
in Tatooine?
that's a good boss. I like it. So now I've just been test popping seeds that I've made over the last year, just, you know, test popping a bunch of them before I send them out to people. Just making sure they'll germinate. They'll end up either in sprouts in a salad or in the worm bin or something. And then got another breeding run I got to do of my next little project. So just, you know, I got a big cake, so I'm just chewing it little by little pieces.
Nice. Good to hear. And then last but not least, and with their presentation for this week, Cascadian. How you doing, sir? How things going?
I'm doing pretty good, man. Glad to be here. Really enjoy talking this stuff. So it's fun to put these little presentations together and show up and give you guys the spiel and talk shop for a little bit. So glad to be here.
Great. And good fun. They're very informative.
Let's see. So today we're talking bottleneck effect. This one is, so if you've understood the last couple presentations, this one's fairly short because it relies on a lot of what I've already talked about. Let's see if I can get this to work properly. Here we go. You can see that, yeah?
Yep.
Cool. So the bottleneck effect is when you have a population and something drastic happens and a large majority of that population dies. This can happen from natural disasters, you know, environmental things. This can happen from long-term climate change. This can happen from human intervention. With animals, it would be something like overhunting, or plants, it's overharvesting. So it's a drastic reduction of the alleles, more critically, in the population. So the concept here is that you have a particular trait and it has all this variation. So let's say it has, just for example, 10 variants and something happens and there's not even enough, like there's not even 10 survivors. So there couldn't even possibly be one individual for one variant. Like there's not even representation of all the alleles. You've lost completely 100% these alleles. They're gone. You have a fraction of the alleles left. So what this looks like is something like this. On the left, you've got the original population and all of the variation for that one trait. We're just talking about one trait. This applies for every trait, but one trait at a time. So you have this growth trait or flower trait, whatever it is, has all this variation, something happens, and now you only have a fraction of what you started with. This leads to new allelic frequencies on the other side of the event, which, as you've seen in previous weeks, changes the ratios and then changes the frequency long-term of the traits, the traits you actually see. That's the basis of it here. What causes the catastrophic event is the part that makes every one of these situations unique. So if it was an environmental disaster and whatever you are talking about grows in the tropics and all of a sudden it went to desert climate, then that's a particular type of pressure. And the individuals that come out of or survive the event are generally continuously placed under that pressure. That pressure is not just like one and done. It's not like a pressure point. It's like you broke a bone. It doesn't just happen and go away. It happens and then it persists. A volcano erupts and changes the way that the sun comes through the atmosphere. That lasts for years. Or an ice age comes that lasts for however decades, hundreds of years, thousands of years. A tsunami will come through that will rearrange the terrain for a decade. It has a long-term effect. So in a grow, this is equivalent to you've popped your seeds and you've made your selections. You might have popped 10 seeds and maybe you kept your one female, one or two males. That's your bottleneck. The selection pressure was you, and this is your garden, so you are not going anywhere. The next generation, you're going to probably put that next generation under that same selection pressure because you're trying to push this line in that particular direction. So your selection pressure hasn't gone anywhere. You haven't gone anywhere. And then what you're talking about in that instance is bottleneck after bottleneck after bottleneck. So if you were lucky enough to see my post last night on Instagram, I made a little blip it because I found a diagram online about how we've gone from wild types to early domesticates to modern varieties. And that's essentially what's happening when you're line breeding. If you were to start with heirloom genetics and work forward, that's essentially what you'd be doing. But a lot of us start with already worked genetics and just keep working them. And it's just bottleneck after bottleneck after bottleneck. When you pop 50 seeds, keep 5, select the best female, hit it with the male that looks just like it. That's what this is. That's what you're doing. And when that happens and the selection pressure stays and these individuals realize that they're living in a situation that they did not originate in, you open up the door for mutation and speciation. But in our instance, we're most likely to see mutation because we're not going to push them hard enough for speciation. Speciation would mean that you actually bred a cannabis plant that when you bred it far enough, you couldn't then turn around and breed it with other people's cannabis plants because it's a new species. That's what it means to be a new species, is you can't breed with the other individuals from the population that you came from. That's like textbook definition of a species. We're not going to really push the plant hard enough for speciation, I don't think. We might eventually, but a majority of us would never see that. We're going to see mutations. We're going to see new traits. We're going to see things pop up in the new generations that we didn't see in previous generations. They might not be new to cannabis. It might be something you've seen in a different population, but when you sit back and think about it, you'll realize that trait was not in the previous generations of this population, and where did it come from? When you take out the instances of stray pollen and all those issues, it comes from mutation. And that's what repeated bottlenecks do to a population, is they open the door for mutation and put the genetics under such a strain that they have to find a better way to perform in that environment. And that's the cause of mutation. They're trying to not just survive, but thrive, and they alter their genetics to do that. So that's the general basis of this, really, is applying the pressure and watching what happens, and trying not to do it too much if you're a good breeder, because you don't want to bottleneck it too fast, or you lose, like the instance I used last night on my Instagram post was, you will lose, like we've in the industry, we've bred these strains with lab testing for high THC. And not just me, but others have noted that as strains get higher in THC, the effect becomes flatter or one-dimensional, or it loses its lasting power. The high goes from 4 hours to 30 minutes, or because you've lost this diversity of cannabinoids due to selecting for THCA synthase. Sorry, I blanked on the word. THCA synthase is what makes THCA, which is what leads to THC. So if you select for plants that have higher amounts of THCA synthase, you're going to push the plants towards higher THC numbers. And that's essentially what we've did without realizing what we did. But with that, the high got flat, boring for some, I guess I should say. And to back up out of that flat high, you literally have to go backwards in the genetics to where you have the more diversity, because you've gone too far. You bottlenecked it too much. You removed those genetics, and there's no way to bring them back outside of mutation. So, are you going to wait for mutation, or are you just going to backtrack to the work you had previously? Like, it's a game we got to play as a breeder. But that's the results of bottlenecking. You get most of the genetics prevented. They're usually killed off. They're prevented from participating in the next generation. So you end up with generally less individuals than there is allele variance. And that's when it really leads to trouble. The second bullet here says the remaining genotypes are continuously subjected to that stress. It doesn't just go away, whether it's the breeder, whether it's the volcano, the ice age, whatever it is. And the last real bullet here is just that new stress, that continuous stress, will insert an opportunity for mutation. That's where neat stuff comes out. That's where things like Freak Show might have came from. The webfoot, duckfoot stuff, the ABC, that sort of stuff came from mutation due to, in the ABC case, probably mutation due to a swift environmental change. It was probably a tropical variety that found itself in the deserts of Australia and freaked out. But that's pretty much the gist, guys. Did I miss any questions or?
No. But opening it up to, let me make sure that we Yeah, I have to remove the spotlight. But yeah, I mean, opening up into to chat as well, and any questions on that. And so what we've basically seen, I think, in the way of summarizing it is, we've talked about, in particular, the founder's effect and the bottlenecking effect is what we're doing. Recommit that every time we buy a pack of seeds, or we only buy a pack of 10. Even if you bought 100 seeds, you're still committing the founder's effect. I mean, in fact, the founder's effect was committed long before you bought those seeds. But and then it's sort of doubling it up with, we then get into the bottlenecking effect, because as you say, we go in and we select 2 plants, maybe 1 plant that you then keep. I mean, you may know, and then by keeping that one going, you kill off the rest of the population altogether. I mean, now you've actually eliminated all by just having that cut going. I mean, that's probably the most extreme end of bottlenecking the genetics. You just removed everything else out of the equation. But yeah, no, that's an interesting point about speciation. I think you pronounced that correctly.
That's a hard one.
Because there's the chili, and I forget the name of it, that grows up in Peru? Somewhere, I forget the name of it. But it looks like a chili, but it's bred now so far apart that it cannot breed with chilies. But it's from the same family originally, but it has drifted so far apart now. And I don't think we maybe are not in our lifetime will we see it, but I think maybe it would be interesting, a great experiment to watch, cultivated indoor or recreational cannabis versus land-raised cannabis. And indigenous cannabis in 10,000 years, can those two actually breed with each other? Or people going, wow, these have become so different because of the selection process, the bottlenecking that's happened through commercialization of it.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting, as time goes on, to take the indoor American modern, whatever you want to refer to it, genetics, and see as it diverges from essentially hemp, when do they not cross anymore? Yeah, that'd be fascinating.
Yeah, and they're very distinctly different things, but have a similar effect, but are a worlds apart. Because that's damn it, I've got to think of the name of that pepper. Lakota. That's what it is. It's Lakota. I think that's the name of the pepper. It's got black seeds. It has the same kind of burn. It's not quite as vicious as a chili pepper. But yeah, so it has all the characteristics, but it isn't. It's pepper adjacent. It's quite bizarre.
Yeah, it's quite possible to do. It's not out of the question. It's just the amount of pressure you have to apply for the extended period. I don't think anybody cultivating cannabis has that as a goal, but that would have to be the goal, I think.
Yeah, you're right. It's a Peruvian Rocoto pepper, Rocoto.
Yeah, they've got furry leaves. There's one of the ones that can last quite well in cold weather. So as long as it doesn't drop drastically below freezing, they can handle overwintering particularly well. They have that look when you look at the leaves, like that's a high altitude, cold weather plant. Good ones to grow.
But yeah, that's why I wanted to present these topics in the way that I did, though. Is that's essentially what we do. We buy the pack of seeds, and that's the founder's effect, and then we pop the pack of seeds and go through them and sort them out, and that's the bottleneck effect.
It's almost one of those interesting things. You sort of say, for the purposes of commercial, or if you're going to release things out into the wild, and I'd say, yeah. So there's this need, if you're doing something commercially, you're going to produce this stable line, keep track of what. But I think at the end of the day, actually keep track of what you're doing genetically, because what can help prevent the bottleneck effect, I guess, is with everybody sharing their genetics amongst each other. So although I get 5 seeds, I might have taken 5 from here, I've taken 5 from somewhere else now as well, and I'm mixing them together. I'm not taking the same 5 and just continuing with those same 5 down the line. It's bringing in other ones from all over the place and continuously adding them into the pool. So you're creating almost that. I mean, there we go. That possibly could lead to that divergence at some point, but you're constantly mixing stuff back in, ideally, in a controlled manner, and that in the controlled manner being, the genetics of what you're adding in, the lineage or the pedigree of what you're adding into the mix all the time.
Right.
And that's still the important bit, is to keep track of that.
You can really tell when a breeder knows what the hell they're doing, because there's a high probability they will work the same cross in multiple lines. So they'll take a Thai and an Afghani and cross them, and then they'll have 500 seeds of Thai Afghan, and they'll pop 100 seeds and make 3 or 4 lines out of it instead of just one. They'll see this cluster, and then they'll see this cluster, and then they'll see maybe 1 or 2 clusters in the middle of the 2 extremes, and they keep every cluster, and they just keep them as clusters. They'll take all these plants and breed them together, and all these plants and breed them together, and then they run those lines separately but alongside each other, generation for generation. And then once you start to notice bottlenecking or something negative popping up in one of them, you can use another one of those lines to open the genetics back up without polluting that whole pool with something that's not Thai Afghani. You don't have to step outside of the stream to bring the flows back together. And that allows you to widen the genetic variability back out. Say you have, Thai Afghani is a really good example. So you have a cluster that's really Thai leaning, really lanky, really long internodes, really thin leaflets. And then you have the Afghani that's really short and squat. They're not all that way, but short and squat and big buds, and doesn't like water, likes water. And then you've got 2 in the middle or 3 in the middle. Well, if one or the other gets really bottleneck, say your Afghani really dry one, these start just popping out little mutants and they don't want to grow anymore. You bring in the Thai leaning side to give it some vigor, to get it to shoot back, to increase the internodes and stuff, but you're still in the same gene pool for 1 generation. And then you go right back to trying to fix that Afghan leaning side where there's not any mutants. If it doesn't work, you bring it back in for 1 more generation to open it back up a little bit to try to fix those mutants. And you can work within like the river of genetics. You can have, it'll in a delta per se for a visual, you can have these various streams of genetic lineage, and you can recombine them to get your desired effect, whether it's growth or psychological, physiological, and not have to like bring in a Congo or a Indian or a Pakistani or something. You can keep it Thai Afghani, but just kind of bounce around in the pool. So sometimes it's important to take multiple lines out of the same population, but group them individually so that you can recombine them later. It helps get you around some of that bottleneck.
I see Dreamer77D in chat asking, can genetic tagging help prevent the bottleneck effect?
Theoretically, but you need a whole lab for that, because you're going to have to tag and trace and track, and there's not, maybe the top cannabis companies will have that kind of money, but the top cannabis companies are looking for clones from breeders. They want other people to do the work. They're not going to make it themselves.
So the onus is really on like those main breeders who produce produce for seed banks and whatnot. It's their responsibility to try and not bottleneck, because how accessible are like land race is going to be for the average Joe, you know?
Right now, they're really accessible.
Hmm.
Right now, they're more accessible now than they have ever been, ever.
Okay.
The amount of pure land races you can get right now, simply through
From
Instagram,
trusted, yeah.
is mind blowing. Absolutely
Yeah.
mind blowing.
And
Yeah.
that's
But
just
then they have to
from
make sure
moving
they're
stuff
trusted.
around.
They're trusted genetics as well, right? Because I mean, I'm sure as much as good stuff, there's as much bogus imitation stuff out there as well.
And there's always the individuals that don't try very hard. There's basically American hybrids all over the world now. So if you go to a traditionally landrace heirloom area and you don't try hard enough, all you're going to do is pick up an American hybrid that's been used to growing somewhere else. You're not really going to get the landrace.
Yeah, you might just end up with the same thing you had back home all over.
Or worse, right? Or worse. Yeah. So there is credibility that needs to be established. There is authenticity that needs to be established. There is intention. Intention is always important.
Is there a way that these breeders have like certificates of authenticity or something like that, or it's just based on previous like say you for example would have dealings with a couple landrace breeders trusted breeders and you're like that, like with a mouth kind of thing? That's how it go.
It's all right now. It's all reputation. It's all who you know and what's your reputation. You know, do you actually do what you say you're going to do? That's what's made the Indian landrace preservation guys so successful. I think is not only did they say they were going to raise this money and do these things for these villages, but then they actually did it. They actually bought clothes and books and built a school and put together a museum. Like they're actually doing these things. So part of it is, you know, taking the chance and building the credibility, and then the other part is keeping your credibility, doing what you said you were going to do.
And so if I was to go to look for like say a Hindu Kush or some sort of landrace genetics from the Far East like that, are there any like breeders that you may be able to recommend to me or anybody else out there that we should go to
for like landrace?
Yeah.
There's a handful. I'm kind of hesitant to just pick names because I don't want to leave.
Yeah. Understood. Yeah.
But there is 4 or 5 on Instagram that have landrace in the name. Like that's
right.
And there's a whole bunch of them. A whole bunch of those guys are working together. So really, once you get
into like one, you can get the rest. Yeah. Good stuff. Right on.
You'll find that once you get to the person who's willing to ship you something, they can talk to quite a few of the other ones and get some of that stuff too if you take the time. So,
networking is pretty good. Cool.
Yeah, it's really cool what those guys are starting to stitch some of that up, and there's a little bit of bad blood between a couple of them, so you got to kind of read through the bullshit. But you got to understand they're all trying to make the same money. They're all fighting for the same cut of the pie. So of course they're gonna have some jabs at each other. So,
hey Bob, how you doing?
Bob, oh what up, Bob? Cheers.
Snuck in there quietly.
Yeah, man. Respect. Thanks for the short presentation. Understandable, you know, for the small word people. You know, appreciate it. But yeah, man, that bottlenecking is definitely, it's a replication process that's been going on, and it's a good vibe still at the end of the day. Thank God it's ganja, you know, something great will always come out of it. But I understand the hesitancy and the recommendation of landrace fees, but I do understand your hesitancy, Cascadian. But it's there.
Yeah. Didn't mean to put you on the spot like that too. Anyway.
He's like, go to India. He's like, go to India. Go to Senegal.
I see.
Yeah.
Magma Seeds asked, I think asked a question about, she's saying, do F1, find lines in those, work them to F2, hit a bottleneck, go back to F1 stock. I think this is going back to what you were talking earlier. We were doing the same crossing over. I think my understanding of it was, from the F1 generation, you create your F2s, and then you could start to produce two stable lines out of that F2 generation, or multiple stable lines out of that F2 generation, without diverging into new genetics being introduced. You're just mixing different versions of the same thing. So create a few stable lines from that F2 generation that you can then bring together to say, okay, I've stabilized the internodal spacing on this one, and I've stabilized the terpene profile on that one, and then I can bring them together a little bit further down the line, and then I can bring that other one that I've worked, I can bring that in again. So you've almost you've locked in various traits and various lines, all from the original parents, and then you just bring in the various ones you want because now you've got them stabilized out.
And I think this is our selection naturally. When you drop it into an environmental, different factor, then you will see the variance is 100%. So that's why even when we work our lines and we back cross them, when you still the open pollination right after you think you've got it secured, that plant out will kind of let you know how secure the dominant genes that you have selected for is dominant, how dominant they really are. When you do that after that back cross, when you hit that open pollination after the back cross, that's on that plant out. That is when we really determine how dominant now these genes are. So just for argument's sake, I've worked Cascadian Kush, F4, did my back cross. Now I'd open pollinate it with 3 or 4 different males. And those seeds that I plant out, it will kind of give me how dominant the Cascadian Kush was now, and which ones really were dominant that can surpass all, breeding. So, but it's just a never ending. It's like a never ending track, so let's keep it up and just take good notes. Keep it up and take good notes,
Yeah, and that's the key thing, taking notes, loads and loads of good notes.
I actually had that whole effect happen recently with the PCK by biodiesel I split. One ended up like Play-Doh, one ended up kind of skunky. The skunk stayed short, both in male and female. The Play-Doh ended up tall, both in male and female. So, I said, you want to split, you split.
And then now you seem to have been able to link quite a good visual trait to the 2 terpene profiles. You're saying this short is always like that and tall is always the other one. So there's clearly a link between those two. So that's getting into that, the whole linked traits.
Yeah, and we'll have to proof it out here. In the future, I'll have to actually start popping those and see if that proofs out with the, all the on both sides of it. But we'll find out. This is the fun of it, This is hands-on, practical science. Whee!
And that's why the ability to track your chemotype, or to really see the chemical combinations of it is really kind of nice when you have access to the technology. But as the bush breeders, it kind of just gives us the opportunity to take on the journey, So allowed.
And it's interesting. I mean, you're talking about chemotype because that's the bit that we're actually all interested in, and it falls under the phenotype umbrella. It's part of the bigger piece, and chemotype is one of the slices in that bigger spectrum. But that is what we're specifically interested in, and
I used it correctly, right? That was a correct use of the term, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's saying that because most of our notes that we take are fairly anecdotal. It's visual and experiential. But really, I cannot tell you the chemical combination and track that continually, which would be a more indicator, would kind of assist with breeding a little bit more, if you understand. But we have to do it very visual and very anecdotal to keep it going. The tall ones, this, and the short one, and the
guesswork out of it. They'll take a lot of the guesswork out of it.
A lot of times, because you're still because now the phenotypic expression will be different. So you might be chemically breathing towards this, and then the environmental factors
Yeah.
allow. You understand? So, but I definitely see you can get a more solid guess by using chemical, analysis.
Yeah, I mean, and that, yeah, what we're calling the terpene profile and how high we get from it and the buzz we get from it, that's the chemotype. That's what we're talking about at that point, except we experience it as smell and narcotic effect. But you could quantify that down to this is the exact chemical profile that this thing produced. And that's where it's going to go when it comes to big commercial, because they don't give two shits what it looks like. Does it have this chemical profile? They don't care how you bred it. They don't care what the crossing combination is. They're just going to look at what is the chemotype that this produces. And you could arrive at that same chemotype through multiple different strains and crosses. And that's when, if you look at how is rice bought on the big commodity exchange, it's grade A rice. It's not all from the same supplier. It's not all the same kind of rice. It's just grade A rice. So it's all blended together. It's all mixed together, but it'll all be the same at the end of the day, no matter where it's coming from. I say it's not all the same rice. I mean, it's all the same type, but it's grown in different environments, grown all over the place, but it all produces essentially the same thing. And so they'll look for buying in bulk from farmers who produce a chemotype that when we blend all of this together, you can't tell it apart. It all has exactly the same effect. I can extract the chemicals I'm interested in, for extraction purposes.
And with rice, more importantly, it cooks consistently.
I'm working on a visual here real quick that'll help.
Bob just dropped off.
But it's taking me a second to put this together here. So
His internet's not always stable, unfortunately.
But the visual.
I'm laughing at that.
The coconut trees fuck with the reception out here.
And he's back.
Yep, you see?
They just needed to collect some coconuts. He's good to go.
All right, ready again. Seems like the microwave and the internet had a fight a while ago.
And the kids were hungry, so the microwave won. So I hope everybody in chat's having a good evening, and
respect to the chat.
everything's going well there. Yeah, and actually, in 2 weeks' time, I think we can announce it on the 13th. The show on the 13th, we're gonna have Magma Seeds on, so that should be good. Yeah.
Shout out to Magma again. Thank you, bud.
And if there are any other particular, doesn't just have to be with cannabis. I said, this is plant breeding.
I saw a question. Dreamers 77DD. How worried should I be about the bottleneck effect? I guess that goes into what position are you in? Are you someone that's buying it like I was to just get a product at the end? Like I'm using it for medicine. That's my product, no matter what. Yeah, that's what I get. Or are you a breeder? Are you, where do you fall in that? Yeah, if it's in terms of, someone that's just using it for themselves, I think you can. It's important in the sense that you need good genetics and you need something reliable. And if this gets played out in the wrong way, it can be passed down. And especially if you try to get if you're trying to get the same thing over and over again, you're just going to have repeated issues of the same issue if there is any. So that's where I think of it. But anyone else?
So
to me, it seems like another tool in the toolbox. It seems like this is something that could be bad, but it could also be very good, depending on what you're trying to accomplish.
So what I've depicted here is a example. I didn't color all the dots because I didn't feel like taking the time. We only got so much time here today. So the F1 generation, you take two different plants and you mash them together, and you get F2s. In your F2s, like I was saying, you got a Thai and an Afghani. So you got far-leaning Thai, far-leaning Afghani, and then you've got kind of Thai leaning and kind of Afghani leaning. I got 4 examples here. So that would be my 4 groups I would keep. So I would take all of the plants that looked like the Thai parent and put them together and pollinate those together and keep those seeds by themselves. And then I would take all of the plants that looked like the Afghani parent and put those together and breed those together and keep those seeds by themselves. And I'd do the same for the 2 in the middle, the kind of Thai and the kind of Afghani. So I'd have 1 cross, but I'd have 4 different groups of seeds from the 1 cross. So then over the years, each one of those 4 different groups, I would work individually. So the F2s on the F3s on the Thai, very Thai leaning, I would just stay with the Thai leaning genetics and just go F2, F3, F4, F5. You're going to get to a point, F6, F7, depending on what you're selecting for, how hard you're selecting, the amount of parents you use every generation, the amount of traits that you're trying to isolate. Eventually, the genetics are going to, because you're going to get there. You're going to actually select for what you're selecting for. And some of that process removes traits that the plant needs. And you're going to need to bring some of that vigor back, or some of the disease resistance back, or the insect resistance, or something. You're going to need to bring something back to it. So then you would take that, in this example, F7 that started to slow down. It's very Thai. So maybe it's lanky, maybe it doesn't have stem structure and it flops over. Maybe it just doesn't have very good yield. It's got super potent flowers, they're super flavorful, the plant stretches like mad, but maybe it just doesn't yield and you've never got it to yield. That line just doesn't, and you want it to. So you would mix it with something, maybe the Afghani leaner, not the pure Afghani, but the leaner, just to get some more yield. That's what this is here at the F7, is you're mixing those 2 pools you isolated from your initial cross back together to bring vigor back into the line without bringing in a 3rd genetic or 4th genetic from somewhere else. You're working in the same pool. This takes generations. So you're not going to buy F1s, pop F2s, see bottleneck, and have to go back to F1s. You're going to make F1s or buy F1s, get to F7, 8, 9, 12, 15 something, and you're going to see weird stuff. Then you're going to have to do something. A lot of people only work the 1 line and 1 line, and they screw themselves, and they have to bring in another cross or another genetic or another plant that they really like, and they end up with something that isn't original to what they bought or what they found. It's something new, but it's the combination of 2 things they like instead of just having those 2 separate. So they kind of screw themselves because they couldn't do that optionally. They had to do that to save their genetics. So that's kind of how you can undo a bottleneck, because then say this is F8 right here, I could take this one and do this to it and make 4 new families here and isolate the same genetic that I was going for here. This same set of traits would be this one then. And then I would have a new kind of Thai, a new kind of Afghani, and then a new Afghani one. So you would kind of redo this whole part over again down here, or right here, after you had to reintroduce another line. You can then blow that next generation out, segregate it some more. So you do this a few times, and you do this on a few lines, and you turn your 1 cross here. Oops. You turn this 1 cross into 4, 8, 12, 16 different lines. You have like lines upon lines. You've got all these different traits in these different groups. You've made basically a whole seed company out of one cross. You pulled a DJ Short. That's what DJ Short did.
And that is on the basis that you actually started with things that were distant from each other in the beginning.
Right, like a
And
yeah.
Yeah, and they themselves monohybrids, or what's the word I'm looking for? Damn it! Not heterozygous, but homozygous. That they were actually heterozygous plants. They weren't homozygous plants, because that's when the bottlenecking would happen really quickly, and you'd struggle to break create anything new, because they're both super stable lines, and when you bring them together, you're not going to create too much variation, if that makes sense. If they don't have recessive traits off that they can play off on each other, you're not going to create too much variation as you make it. I mean, it's highly unlikely, especially in the world of cannabis at the moment. You may struggle if you were buying commercial seeds. Like you'd cross them, and then you'd cross the next generation, and you wouldn't get too heavy a variation springing up.
So if you crossed like Cinderella 99 and Deep Chunk, two very homozygous lines, you're going to get, in the next generation, you're going to get very Cindy 99 looking, and you're going to get very Deep Chunk looking, and you're not, like you said, you're not going to get that in the middle. So to bring out the in the middle stuff, you're going to have to take each end of that a generation or two or three, and then very strategically introduce the other line into it, both ways, and kind of smear that genetic a little bit. So make the cross, isolate the Cindy 99 to F3, F4, and then bring in a little bit of that Deep Chunk to smear that Cindy 99 just a little bit, and from the other line, and it'll kind of break out some variation in that Cindy 99 side, and you can kind of tease out the inner. You're
kind of playing with like percentage of how much Deep Chunk do you want in, and how much I guess it's playing a slightly different game to when you come up with two heterozygous lines that when you cross them together, suddenly you've got the real freak suddenly turning up the complete runt of the litter over there, and some serious dominant one down the other end. You have with just in amongst itself, it's freaking out and doing some oddities. Here, it's more, I'm actually able to just go, how much of you want? 75% Deep Chunk, cool, I can do that for you. There it is, and you can actually produce it.
Yeah, it's with homozygous lines, it's a more of a finesse. With heterozygous lines, it's more of a inevitability. There's no way around it with heterozygous, but with homozygous, you have to finesse that delta of genetics into different lines. You have to actively cross and cross.
What you describe is perfect, except that what we do it on two sides. So as I say, you take that Deep Chunk leaning or the C99 leaning, and you work that to your C99, but at the same time, you do the reverse breeding on the other side. And then when you introduce those two, it's the happy medium you're looking. So the happy medium that happens on the Deep Chunk lean inside, you should be seeing something, the happy medium coming out on this side as well. So by the time you put those two happy mediums together, so that is kind of how you work the parallel, and then you join them back up in the, if that's what you're looking for. So it's the happy medium is what you're really trying to breed for, because that will be the most dominant, consistent line, out of all of them once you introduce the two of them together.
Yeah, man. Yeah, you kind of have to blend it from both sides, like you're saying. You have to do one to one side and then mirror it on the other, and hope they blend into the middle. Yeah.
If it's the happy medium you're breeding for, because if you're breeding for just to really, you like the Deep Chunk, but you just wanted this out of the Cindy, then for you would just work that, and that would be, you're good to go. But as I say, the happy medium is what you're looking for. That is how we blend the two and the both tracks, and then we join them, and then we know we have we don't really say stable line, but we call it an official stream, but we won't really name it until then.
Yeah, I mean that's that case of you're essentially producing a dihybrid F1. So you're creating two stable lines that you know when you bring them together, boom, this is what I'll create every single time I bring these two stable lines together. Which again is that goes back to when you see
most of the time, this is what will come out. You're gonna have
yeah.
one and two different, but most of the time, this is what you're going to see.
Yeah, yeah. With a high percent, the high guarantee that that's likely to be what you're going to get. And of course, that's the big thing when you see F1 on a packet of seeds. You've got to ask, well, is this the inbreeding F1, which is very different to a dihybrid F1. The dihybrid F1 you'll pay a lot of money for. The inbreeding F1 will be like it's just the first in the breeding line. It doesn't mean anything really.
And that's why I said the true test that we use, it takes maybe 5 years or 4, but the true test that we use is once you found that happy medium, you open pollinate it to something completely different. And once you plant out that seeds, the happy medium should be the most consistent line that you see overall, regardless of, how whatever you put into that. That is the true test for us,
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Or display. So I say display, not test. That the true display will be in that breeding up,
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope that helped though with the question. I realized I didn't put any scope to the any timeline to how quick something like this would happen. So that's why I made that second little chart real fast to try to show like how many generations this stuff can kind of take.
Yeah. And I mean, back to that question about, how concerned should you be about it? I think it does depend on what you're doing. If you are a seed breeder, then it is something you need to be very conscious of, that you don't paint yourself into a corner all of a sudden. But if you're a casual home grower and like mixing plants together and playing around a bit, I don't really think it's that much of a concern. I think it could almost be quite interesting to see, look, you could deliberately do it and then see what you can spin off and play around with, because it's not a commercial venture. So it doesn't matter if you accidentally go down the wrong path.
There's a seed breeder right now that I'm not interested in because they have kind of taken a different spin on the planting. So, for example, they are putting out some strains that they want to call any weather. So obviously these are targeted to people with obviously mold or humid or horrible, so at least you know what they are breeding for when they say, oh, this is any weather strain. Obviously they're not going to tell you that it's going to be the biggest yield, the biggest, but they're pretty much leaning that it will finish in your environment regardless of how shabbily, quote unquote, you treat it. So you have these things are the ultimate relaxer. So, when these strains come with these kind of vibrations, it kind of makes it a bit, you see where the breeder is coming from, if you understand what I mean. So it's kind of, I kind of like how the pie is growing. I never see the pie as getting smaller. It's always just growing. Everybody's doing something and the pie is just getting bigger and bigger, so more slices and pieces for everybody.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm also keeping an eye on chat here. What did I just say yeah to?
And I guess kind of related to people. That's kind of the beautiful part about.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, that's kind of the beautiful part about people. We don't keep as separate people anymore. We keep mixing our gene pools, and as a result, we get more and more interesting people.
Yeah, man.
You mentioned earlier. So I wanted to point out that there's another sort of saving grace in all of this. You mentioned earlier that sometimes, especially hobby guys, smaller situations, they might find themselves working a line with friends is a really good way to utilize the tool of having multiple lines of the same genetics and being able to do what I was just showing a few minutes ago when you get to bottlenecks in F6, F7, or wherever they happen to pop up. If you and 3 or 4 of your friends or grow buddies are all working the same cross because you all like it, but you all like slightly different things about it, you can save each other's ass. You can,
and you've all got slightly different environments as well. So
right. You can
Exactly.
save each other because you can send 20, 25, whatever of your seeds that you've been working to your buddy, and he can do the same to you. If you guys start to run into trouble, your genetics start freaking out. You say, dude, I don't know what I did the last generation, but this isn't looking so good. Can you send me a few? I need to reinvigorate this with something. And pick which one of your friends has the best fit for what you're trying to solve. And then you've saved each other's asses without having to dilute the genetic pool the same way. It's just you only had responsibility for one of the 4 lines of that genetic. So you only really had to worry about what you liked, and your buddy only really had to worry about what he liked, and you didn't have to do 4 different pollination runs for the same generation of genetics, but you still have the same level of insurance. You still have the same level of guarantee that your hard work and time and investment and your love for this particular terpene set or whatever, if your seeds go bad, if your house fucking burns down, if your partner leaves you, if whatever, and you lose your seeds, you don't have to worry that also your whole thing is gone. You call your buddy, be like, dude, look, you won't believe what happened, but man, could each one of you guys send me like 25 seeds? And now you've got 3 different lines of what you loved, and you can work that all back into what you liked. And then in 5 or 6 generations, give that back to those friends, and you've got this new mix of that same genetic line. Like, you just keep playing in this same pool and mixing and matching and never introducing anything new. You can keep vigor high if you use a couple of friends.
So basically what you're talking about is putting your Legos together over and over again without buying new Legos.
Right.
I like it.
I like the use of community as well, trying to get together with people.
iMedic's asking if you should try to have the same base grow method. And I have heard instances and I've seen instances where something selected in like a hydroponic system doesn't do as hot in a soil system. If that's the case and you guys are growing drastically differently, mix your genetics more frequently. Mix them every couple of generations. Make sure that the soil ones still play good in the hydro, and make sure the hydro ones still play good in the soil, and don't let them become selected for that. Keep that fluid on those genetics and include both hydro and soil loving plants in the generations, and mix them often enough that they don't get isolated. If you find yourself in a situation where you grow in soil, your house burned down, you lost your seeds, and the only seeds you can go get are hydroponically grown for 10 generations, it's going to be a pain in the ass to grow them in soil. It'll work. You're going to pull your hair out. You're going to get a few gray hairs, but you can do it. It'll work. It'll be just fine. But if you mix and match those genetics more often, they won't get so used to growing in one particular environment or one particular medium, and you'll have greater success if something like that happens. So you can kind of do the same thing for environment grow mediums that you can for traits. You just kind of mix and match to keep the plants and the genetics on their toes so they don't lock into something. The more they lock into something, the more trouble you're going to have, because locking in is bottleneck. That's synonymous language there. You lock in a trait, that's a bottleneck. That can be good or bad. So just mix and match more frequently.
And that's why I like proper note taking along all the way. So even if these indications can be given from the breeder, it's very good. So if you know that this is where you have work and your breeding environment has been cocoa, has been aquaponic, has been this, at least it gives us a better indication of what to look forward going forward. Because you do hear breeders say this, I love this strain, but man, it's just so finicky, and you take it and put it in a soil environment and boom, it takes off. So sometimes you want to select the finicky one. But it's really understanding basic growing practices. So mainly what I'm saying is that if the strain was grown in a hydroponic environment, then you can understand the root system and the method of feeding itself based on the, what's the big word, osmotic pressure or whatever within the root zone. You know, that's what it was used to. If it was used to like a deep water culture or a flood and drain system, then you can see the roots were used to drying out, or the plants over generation. This was the type of feeding structure that it was used to. You know, things like that. So, you know, it can be, so basically you should transfer it. You should know how to, you know, replicate that environment almost, you know, maybe put in more feeding periods instead of doing a big no-till system, you know, things like that. So you just try to imitate where it's coming from. So I'm just saying that these indicators that are given along the breeding will help the grower to try to replicate to get the best outcome of what the breeder intended. Hope I didn't just confuse everybody.
No, man.
No.
No, just trying to keep up with chat, man. You're good.
Yeah. I saw so Australian Grown said something in chat. The GMF was just mentioning he cloned a male, and I guess it turned female on him. It intersects. Maybe.
I mean, so mistakes can happen. Like, you want to make sure you didn't mix the tags up first off. If that's not the case, then there's the potential that this
Polyploid?
So I've heard of female seedlings. You grow them out and they'll throw nuts. You take a clone, you grow it out, it doesn't throw nuts. Could be the opposite of that. I think it might be a hormone thing. I haven't really looked into that one yet.
Lemon Hoko is saying it's reverse hernia.
Right, which is it's hormone related. The seedling is going to have different hormone levels and a different like they have different. We've noticed they have different vigor, right? They're going to have different levels of hormones associated with that seedling vigor that a clone's not necessarily going to mimic 100%. I'm not exactly sure what the difference is in the hormones between a seedling and a clone, but there has to be something because we've seen this too often.
Yeah, he said it's definitely not a mixed up tag. He eliminated that for sure. Breed with a polyploid mother and a father was triploid. So that's it. This is a good complex question we could wade into.
It's one of those things because if it was just a regular, not one where there's extra chromosomes. Well, not one where there's extra chromosomes kicking around. Then yes. Well, then I would say no. It's unlikely that it can happen because it's a male plant. It's not carrying any. This is the odd thing. It's not carrying. The male plant carries even less genetic material than the female plant does. So the male plant can't produce true female parts. It's just not possible for it to do it. It doesn't have that in it. But if it's a polyploid and it has, for instance, the
But you have seen male plants that produce like bracts or calyxes or whatever it is. They might not give you a whole bud set, but they will definitely give you,
some hint of it. But those are probably you might find that those were polyploid or triploids, for instance, where they had the extra chromosome involved in it. So it's very rare that it happens.
You see them in the bush, and sometimes I've wondered if I should collect those seeds and try anything, because you might have maybe, 10 seeds or 5 seeds on a whole plant, but you see the bract, you see everything with the seed formation, everything in there. But we normally just cut down those trees, guys, but I've never really traveled down that line, if you understand what I mean. But if you have a female plant that will express itself that way, as I said, it doesn't happen regularly, but you definitely see male plants, and they do have, they come up with it's not a bud set, but it's like a one, you know, a one pollen sac or whatever you call it, a one seed sac on the stem.
Yeah. I know what you mean. They do sometimes, especially, throw those out. And that's what can confuse people. Like, is it male? Is it
Freaks
female?
of nature.
I do want to put out there that what I've covered so far in these presentations is elementary for plant genetics and plant breeding. This is very, very entry level basic stuff. Some of these questions, some of these things we're trying to puzzle out here are, if this is a 100 level college class, you're asking 300 or 400 level questions. So there's going to be part of it is going to be determining the answer, but then the other part of it is eliciting the answer in a way that you can actually understand. I could go look up the answers to these things, but I don't know that I could then turn around and explain it to anybody in a way that would make sense, is really what I'm getting at. We need to keep going down the rabbit hole here to get to things like polyploidy and what happens when you have extra chromosomes and what other freaks can come out of this, because we're only talking about week 1 of what would be a full year of college classes. Like, this is just the very basics here. So
we're scratching the surface, kind of.
I'll go as deep as my brain can handle on all of this. Just kind of sit tight with me, and we'll hang here, see how long Pete wants to put up with me, and we'll see how deep we can go. But some of these questions are a little bit deep for the surface we've scratched so far.
No, exactly. And I think that is, so far we have been doing all of this at a 50,000 foot view of it. It's that real big overarching kind of these are some of the general rules. Rule of thumb, of course, it is just the rule of thumb, and for every rule there are exceptions to those rules. And
I guess it's more or less to get people thinking and to get them a little more knowledgeable and wary of exactly what's going on. And because there's no way anything we discuss here every Saturday we can discuss in full. On every show is just going to be able to just like scratch the surface, and I guess like people who are really super interested will definitely dig deeper and come back.
I thought it was just a bunch of stoners trying to sound smart, but since
sometimes
that's my disclaimer. So anything that Rasta Bob says, please don't take it as my disclaimer. But gentlemen, it was great what I do have to hit the road, but I really appreciate the time, give thanks for the moment and keep up the excellent work,
Thanks for joining us, Bob.
I appreciate the support, Pete, the platform is excellent. Keep it up, GMF, Duckweed, and the chat crew. Thanks for the support. As I say, it's nothing without. Keep asking the questions because they keep us motivated and keep us kind of, tuned in. I like that. So I appreciate everything, man. Give thanks for the moment.
No. Thanks, Bob. Thanks for stopping by. As always, it's an absolute pleasure having you. You're always more than welcome to swing by. Stay blessed. Have a great day. Enjoy the farm.
Jar fruit out. Oh yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the idea really, with this again is to keep it. You've got to start somewhere. And the idea, we started, we say the lowest common denominator, but it just sets the ground base for everybody, and then we just work up from there. And the nice thing is, people are throwing out, which is great to see questions that get answered. We will get around to answering them. At least, we can answer them to a certain extent now, and then maybe to some of the answers don't mean too much, but over time, like, oh, okay, hang on, that now clicks. I get it. I understand where that's going. And again, it's make us better educated as consumers, I think, is the really interesting thing.
Yeah, it's always nice to get those tough questions too, because it means people are actually like, I said it in a way that was digestible. Not only did I say it, but it sunk in, and they were able to think deeper and come back at me with something that I wasn't ready for. But neither are you, honestly. So
yeah, no kidding.
We'll get there. I'm excited to get there. I'm excited to go that far and get that deep into this, and and really shed some light for the community.
Mm.
It'll be a great time to continue this on, to get out of, I mean, the 50,000 foot is fun, but once you really get to, hey, check this out, look at this particular instance or what happened here, like, and we can all share terminology and we all talk on the same playing field, and it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think that is definitely got a lot to do with it. Is that we're all talking the same language. That's also a lot to do with this. Is that bound, that setting there that level. Cheers, should be ducking off with GMF. Just drop off there. Yeah.
Cheers,
All
guys.
right, Trudes.
Take care.
Catch you later, bud. Where can everybody find you before you go?
On Instagram, Scooby Doo, and Facebook, The Growing Buds, and Cannabis, The Growing Buds.
Excellent,
Cheers.
buddy. Stay safe. Catch you later. But yeah, that's certainly it. So once we've all established the same language, then we can really further the conversation. Because a lot of the ambiguity goes out the window, and a lot of the misunderstandings, and or just missing each other by talking about the same thing but coming at it from slightly different angles.
Right.
It's always good fun. And I tell you what, on that note, I think what we should do is we'll kick into the after show. If anybody would like to join us, there is the link. You're more than welcome to bounce in and chat with us for a little while. So then quickly, where can everybody find you, Raptor? Where can everybody find you, sir?
Hey everyone, this was such a great show. Learned a lot, and it really got my gears turning. But yeah, I'm Raptor Grow. You can find me at Instagram, Raptor Grow, all one word, lowercase. And yeah, you could also find me here on Operation Grow, Saturdays, same time, same place. That's 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And Fumidor and the Flavors, check us out. We're usually meeting up Tuesdays, Wednesdays. Oh, looks we got some people in. So yeah, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time and 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Saturdays, Brews with Buds. We have a lot of fun with Brews with Buds. Don't really drink too much, but yeah, I enjoy having a conversation with friends and hope you do too. Oh, and one more thing, we are starting, some friends and I are starting a neighborhood hangout, and we're starting it off with a Discord, and in the future, very close future, we'll be setting up a YouTube channel. So hopefully we will all join us. Yeah, go ahead and put the to my friends in the neighborhood that I know they're watching, put a link for all the people again, if you don't mind. Yeah, that's it for me. You can see me tonight, or tonight for my time, West Coast, but Pete's morning time.
Yeah, tomorrow morning for some of us. And Duckweed, where can we find you, sir?
Yeah, what up? You can find me around. I'm not around too much for the past couple of weeks, probably having some technical difficulties, but always around in the chat and in that Discord channel Raptor just mentioned. Yeah, always kicking it there. And yeah, Operation Grow. Hopefully by next week, could be back on Fumi's, having a good time out there. Yeah, thanks again, Pete and Cascadian. Pete for hosting us, and Cascadian for coming and sharing great knowledge. And everyone in chat, cheers.
Yeah, and thank you for joining us. Absolutely great to have you here. GMF, so where can we find you?
Well, you can typically find me hanging out here or hanging out at Fumi's. So, feel free to join us there. So you can find me on Instagram if anybody has any questions, anything I can help with. If you got any, brewing, fermentation, food, weed questions, whatever, Genetic Memory Farms at Instagram. And thank you again to Pete for being willing to host us and make this platform. Thank you to Cascadian for coming and edifying us. I'll throw an early thank you to Magma for being willing to come and edify us on the 13th. So y'all keep an eye out for that. And yeah, just holler if I can be helpful to anyone. And just, I will look more into that question and see if I can find a better answer that might actually help out for Weed Australia. So yeah, have a great one, y'all.
Excellent. And Cascadian, once again, thank you very much for the presentation, sir. If anybody would like the presentations, by the way, they're available to all patrons. I don't know what to call them, members on Patreon. So yeah, you can find them there. They're available for download. In fact, today's one's already now up there and available. But yeah, Cascadian, where can everybody find you, sir?
You can find me here for the foreseeable future. You can find me on Cascadian Grown on Instagram. I'm also Cascadian Grown on Cannabis, but I don't check it very much. Find me hanging out with Fumi probably tonight. I haven't been there in a few weeks. Sorry, Fumi, but you'll probably have to put up with me tonight. And if you want more herbal knowledge, follow Heirloom Hour on Instagram. That's my new herbal knowledge database I'm working on. And if you want to learn more about all that, look up Heirloom Hour on Instagram. If you can't figure it out, DM me. I'll give you the tag. So
excellent. And you can find me at Operation Grow 2019 on Instagram. Here, obviously, also at PL Grow Systems. And if you use the coupon code OG Show at checkout at PL Grow Systems, that's plgrow.systems, and then go to the store, it'll get you 10% off a Minder unit. So yeah, and otherwise feel free to jump in if you still want to. I'll post the link up one more time. If you want to jump in for the after show, there you go, there's the link. Feel free to jump in and join us. But on that note, stay safe, everybody. Thank you for joining us in chat. Really great to see you all, and we'll see you again next week.
Cheers,
Let's